Welcome to the Believe in Texans podcast brought to you by FanDuel. But huge game. And it is a weird year for the Kansas City Chiefs. They've got a 500 record. And if this was any other year, and if I didn't know anything about the Chiefs' background, let's just wipe out the last decade of the Chiefs' history. I think you would be looking at this game here as, hey, don't sleep on this young Chiefs team. I know they might have a 500 record, but all of their losses have been by a one-score margin. They've got this quarterback in Patrick Mahomes that maybe they haven't been that consistent on offense, but man, he can pull a rabbit out of a hat at any given time. And boy, does he make some incredible plays while scrambling. He can also, don't sleep on him by his dad bod appearance. He can run for yardage too. This Travis Kelce, don't know where he came from, but boy, he can do some damage. All of this, the speed on the perimeter, all of these things are true. The defense, the Chiefs defense, if you knew nothing about how good and how scary the Chiefs defense had been in the past, you look at them and say this year, well, look, they're 7th in scoring defense. They're 9th in scoring offense. That seems like a pretty solid team. Last year, let's go back to the world in which we know the Chiefs' history. Last year, they were 15th in scoring offense, and they were 4th in scoring defense. So they go from 4th in scoring defense to 7th in scoring defense this year, and it shouldn't seem like it makes all that much of a difference. It's the style and the manner in which they're making plays or not making plays has changed a lot, and we'll get to some of those stats a little bit later. But the Chiefs are a team that has potentially 3 starting offensive linemen out going into this game, and the Texans are the number 1 scoring defense in the league, number 1 in a whole lot of margins. So there's an offense versus defense dynamic here when you're looking at Chiefs versus the Texans that's lopsided if you don't know the history of the Chiefs and if you don't know that Pat Mahomes is the quarterback. Let's take a listen to Matt Nagy on his belief that the Chiefs need to prepare for an ugly game.
Very first thing that you notice when you watch this Texans defense, you see them on TV or you watch them like we do in the cut-ups that we have, is they're super relentless. The edge pressure that they have, they don't have to bring much pressure. They can get a lot of pressure one-on-one. They're really, really good on the edge. They're really, really good on their whole defense. So when you have the guys on the inside, the linebackers, the DBs, everything, it presents a challenge. I think in this game for us, we create our game plan offensively. What do we want to do? Make that loud and clear to the offense in the beginning of the week, and then we got to execute it and know what kind of game this is going to be. It's probably not going to be a real pretty game, and that's okay. This team doesn't allow many points. So when you go into it, the goal is to score as many as you can, but what's real and how you're going to do it. And I think the team messaging, the offensive messaging from us is just do what you're supposed to do, coach how we're supposed to coach. And we have a lot of trust in our guys, and I think a lot of confidence, but we have a lot of respect because they're a good football team and they're very well coached.
All right, that I was surprised that Chiefs fans, and I think I got a pulse a little bit of where Chiefs fans are, at least some Chiefs fans are right now. I thought that was all well and good, standard fare for an offensive coordinator, respecting the opponent, all of that. But I think just saying it wasn't going to be a really pretty game and points are going to be hard to come by, all that. People are starting to lose their patience with Matt Nagy, who's been running the offense for the last couple of years now. And it's funny because when everything's humming, well, in reality, it's actually an Andy Reid offense. Lately, Matt Nagy's been getting a lot of blowback, and I'm not as dialed in, obviously, as people up in Kansas City. But there's some curiosities about that offense right now. I gave you the numbers, and it shouldn't be as bad as it is. I think there are a lot of things masked last year by the fact that they kept winning games. And because the defense was putting the offense in advantageous situations. When I look at various reasons cited for why the Chiefs offense is struggling this year, people bring up red zone inefficiency. You know what they're better at this year than they were last year? Their red zone touchdown scoring percentage. They're actually better in the red zone this year than they were last year. But the sum total of it on the win-loss record isn't as good as it was last year. Stalled running game. The run game's been a significant weakness, contributing to offensive struggles, I read in one article. Let's see. Last year, they were 22nd in rushing offense. Right now, they're 16th in rushing offense, it's 100% true. This has been true of Andy Reid for years. Man, it seems like he just has no passion whatsoever for running the ball, or Matt Nagy, or whoever you want to blame. There's times this year, though, where I'm looking through Kareem Hunt's game log, in the number of times that he's run for 30 or 40 yards in a game, probably outnumber the times that he's run for 60 or 70 yards in a game. And a couple of weeks ago, he had over 100 yards rushing for the first time in the game against Indianapolis. But you got to remember also that they ran over 90 plays of offense in that game. So Kareem Hunt has 30 attempts, but that's only a third of the total plays in the game. It's not like they were necessarily run heavy. And the Chiefs will do this thing, which I know is frustrating for Chiefs fans, where they'll be running the ball real effectively, and then it just disappears. And this over-reliance, one of the other things cited, is still something that's been cited multiple times in the past about the Chiefs, an over-reliance on Mahomes' improvisational ability. Yes. At times it feels like, all right, we need Pat Mahomes to scramble around and find somebody downfield, and Xavier Worthy or Rashee Rice, whomever, Hollywood Brown, and they rely on his improvisational brilliance. It's just that you can't rely on that as often when your defense hasn't been as imposing as it typically is. To show some of the stats, here are the Chiefs' defensive stats this season. 22 sacks, that puts them at 27th in the NFL. They've taken the ball away 10 times. That's tied for 26th. Yards per play, 5.6. That's 23rd in the NFL. Their third down rate is 43%. That's 26th in the NFL. It's not necessary. It's on the sum total of it all, it hasn't been a bad defense, but they're not making these high impact plays that give the offense short fields or create extra possessions in the game. So Pat Mahomes has more time to work his magic. They're just not as imposing of a defense. And yet they're still a very respectable defense. Here's Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator, who people are starting to wonder for the first time, is this defense kind of gotten found out? Is it gotten kind of stale? Here's Spagnuolo talking about what a great no helmets practice they had this week.
Today we had you guys saw the practice. Coach on Wednesdays does the no helmet practice, and we've had a bunch of those in the 7 years I've been here. I told the unit this morning that I thought that was the best no helmet practice that we've had here in 7 years. I guess where I'm going with it is that nobody's lost interest in what we're doing. Nobody's lost. I think they have just jacked it up. Talk about the defensive guys in their preparation, because they know, the margin for error now is really, really.
The reception on social media that I saw to that by Chiefs fans, again, not all that warm and fuzzy. They're not super enthusiastic about how the Chiefs had a great no helmets practice. Looking at it from Spagnuolo's perspective, who I love, I think Spagnuolo is a great defensive coordinator. I think there's a couple things working against him this year, but the ability of the Chiefs to disguise their blitzes, some of the things they ask the defensive players to do mentally, that is a lot of the stuff that you want to see in a no helmets practice. I don't know if I ever participated in a no helmets practice other than in emergency situations, but it's okay. I'll take that maybe they come out there and they're a little bit more dialed in. The pass rush, with or without the blitz this year, just hasn't been good. And they can't get a pass rush going with just four players. Chris Jones hasn't been himself. George Karlaftis hasn't been as good as the guy that earned that contract they gave him in the offseason. And he's going to be going up. Those guys will be going up against the Texans offensive line that has improved markedly over the last few weeks, especially with their current configuration. The question about why is Spagnuolo's defense not as good this year, I think there is an element to the element of surprise is just completely gone. And the Chiefs have been the lead dog for so long that teams have been figuring out and spending entire off seasons looking at how do we combat some of these disguises and some of these exotic looks, but B, how are the teams that are doing it successfully doing it? We saw the Cowboys figure out the blitz a few times. Saw Dak Prescott pre-snap change into a play that was perfect for whichever blitz was coming. The other thing is that, look, it's copycat league, and a lot of other defenses are now doing the stuff that Spagnuolo has been doing. So offenses get more reps to look at from the Chiefs themselves, but they play against more defenses that are also doing similar things. And it's just that element of surprise and that ambush factor isn't quite as strong as it used to be. And I think that's an oversimplification, because it's not like Spagnuolo was doing anything differently last year to an extreme degree than he'd been doing in previous years. And it was still very effective versus, say, the Texans in the fourth quarter last year. FanDuel has the line on this game at Chiefs -3.5 right now. It stayed pretty steady at that for the last few days, and that's since people knew that the offensive line, I mean, people have known the offensive line and their 3 injured offensive linemen might be an issue since the end of the Cowboys game last week. But here's, if we get to the injuries and the injuries that really matter in this game, the Chiefs' 3 offensive linemen and the way that people anticipate them making up for it and who they've got playing at tackle. I know guys like Mitchell Schwartz and other writers in Kansas City aren't super enthusiastic about it. If you're a Chiefs fan brought here via the algorithm, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter are astoundingly good. They've been so consistent this year. Will Anderson is up there at the top of near the top of the sack rankings. And until he had 2.5 sacks in a game a couple weeks ago, he hadn't had a huge output. It was just week after week after week, he'd have a single sack. Danielle Hunter's had a couple of big multi-sack games, but he's just been seemingly picking up steam as the week has gone along. If I were the Chiefs and if I were an offensive coordinator who didn't hate the run so much, I would look at the Texans and say, all right, Tim Settle, the defensive tackle for the Texans, he's injured. They've got 3 other defensive tackles that they've been rotating in alongside Tim Settle. So as well as Tim Settle has played, I don't think the drop-off needs to be that drastic or even all that much at all. It's just that you're going to have 3 guys rotating and splitting reps up amongst 3 compared to 4. They also have guys like Danico Autry, Dylan Horton. Those guys can move inside on passing downs or in certain situations. The Texans do run 5 defensive linemen a fair amount when they want to put big bodies in there. So not having Tim Settle, again, as long as everybody else stays healthy, probably won't hurt too much when the Texans want to do that. What I'd start to get nervous is if another defensive tackle gets injured, then you're going to have times where you've got defensive ends playing inside where maybe you don't want them to be, or especially in kind of combination downs where it's a run pass threat. That you get a little nervous about putting Danico Autry down inside if there's a heavier percentage of the run. I don't know if Andy Reid leans into that this week or not. On the Texans side, so we talked about the 3 offensive linemen are the big issue for the Chiefs. The Texans, Tim Settle is a guy that's not on injured reserve, but Kamari Lassiter and his injury status and his foot injury, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal because the Texans are already playing with their 5th or 6th safety at this point with Miles Bryant. And if you take away Kamari Lassiter, as my co-host Sean Pendergast on Sports Radio 610 said this morning, you've got this incredible Texans defense, but the 4 main columns on this building are your 2 cornerbacks, Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley, and your 2 defensive ends. Those are the high dollar, high value positions that the Texans have played really well at. And you get rid of one of those columns, it's not a very stable foundation. That's where things get dicey. And Patrick Mahomes' ability to extend plays, even though the Texans pass rush is really good at times, like versus Josh Allen, at containing the quarterback, that gives extra time for Tremont Smith or whoever else is playing cornerback to maybe get into some dicey situations downfield. It's a huge advantage for the Chiefs. If you're looking at compared to Kamari Lassiter versus no Kamari Lassiter, that's a conundrum for the Texans' top ranked defense. Somebody asked me, is there a chance that Derek Stingley travels more now with either the best receiver or the most menacing receiver, depending on how the game's going? I'm not so sure, partly because you've got 2 backups now playing in the secondary if Kamari Lassiter is not playing. And one thing that happens when you have Derek Stingley or any cornerback travel with another receiver is that everybody else has to adjust and change too. And I think that for D'Amico, who likes to keep things simple and let guys play 1,000 miles an hour, they probably just keep Stingley parked on the left side of the defense where he's been for really these last 5 or 6 games. He hasn't traveled very much. We'll see. I'm 100% willing to admit that I might be dead wrong on that. But that's one of the big factors in this game. If we talk to Matt Burke about Tim Settle, here's Matt Burke, the defensive coordinator, answering what they'll do without Tim Settle.
Yeah, sad news. Tim was playing really good football for us and is having a really good season. So obviously, hurting for him and what he's going through. But it's unfortunate this time of year, and that's part of what we're doing. And we'll have guys step up to replace him. But for sure, was playing really good football for us, particularly in the last few weeks. Has had a really good stretch there for us.
Yeah, particularly in the last few weeks. Last week, he had a great tackle for a loss. And the one thing that makes you feel better about it is that Tommy Togiai has really come along. The biggest difference, if you look at last week's game, most of the defensive linemen, I think Daniil Hunter and those guys didn't play more than 43 snaps in the game. That's not many snaps at all. You feel fresh after a game in which you play 40 snaps, as well, especially if you're a rotating defensive tackle, because if Daniil Hunter got 40-some snaps, most of the defensive tackles are going to be getting less than that. I think Sheldon Rankins might have had the equal number. But for one, in a short-term basis, those guys aren't fatigued from last week. But also, as long as the defense can keep getting 3-and-outs, keep taking the ball away, and the offense continues to grind clock, the defensive tackles can stay fresher. There's something it's like physiologically, I try to explain to this to people, because it's not, everybody loves to think like, yeah, you play real hard and you play 70 snaps. Every snap is vicious as the last. Physiologically, as a defensive tackle, especially because you're carrying so much body weight, your legs just get the energy sapped from them. So when you think about defensive line rotating, it's like in hockey where you rotate and you've got the different lines because those guys go out and they bust their ass and then they're spent, and you got to get somebody else in there. So if you want defensive tackles to play 1,000 miles per hour, that rotation really matters. And they're okay with it right now. It's just something to monitor. CJ Stroud. Where are we with CJ Stroud? And I will tell you right off the bat that I was incredibly encouraged by the Texans' offensive performance versus the blitz last week, because pretty much every time the Colts blitzed, the Texans had an answer. I was watching the blitz reel and it took about until like the 8th or 9th blitz before there was somebody in CJ's face and he had to throw it in the dirt. Every other time, by and large, CJ, A, got rid of the ball really quickly, or B, it was a boot and CJ did have somebody in his face, like Leatu Leatu the one time as he was going out to his right, and CJ threw a great pass. But the pass protection, including the running backs and the tight ends and the wide receivers at the time, Christian Kirk had a really nice block on a blitz and then released out, blocked the blitzing defensive back and then released out into his route. They did a great job. The offensive line has just simply gotten better over the course of the season. And with this configuration that they've had for a couple weeks, I'm not nearly as nervous about the offensive line and the Chiefs blitzes as I would have been last year. If Blake Fisher was still playing right tackle, and if you had whichever random guys, I can't even remember at this point, were playing in the interior, and if the Chiefs defense was still humming the way they were last year, I'd be way more nervous about it. I'm still nervous because Spagnuolo can still dial up a blitz, and made Dak Prescott really uncomfortable at times last week. Dak Prescott, made some rhythm throws against the blitz, but also had to scramble and make some pretty impressive throws. So it's by no means a foregone conclusion that the Texans offense is going to look as good in pass protection as they have the last few weeks, but they've got a much better shot. I feel good about it this week. Here's Nick Caley, the offensive coordinator, on how they went about improving on picking up the blitz.
I think we stress communication. We stress seeing it through the same set of eyes. It starts with our mic point and our declaration, and then everybody else being able to communicate and know exactly what we're doing. Leave nothing to chance, communicate, and then be able to make our calls accordingly. We want to protect inside out, and we we take a lot of reps in terms of blitz pickup, stunts, pick stunts, games, et cetera, like that. So it's like anything else, you got to work at it to improve it, and that's what we're still trying to do.
Yeah, that all sounds like really, really basic stuff. This is the problem. For the last couple of years, the Texans have been screwing up the really, really basic stuff. One of the things I was most excited about with Nick Caley when he came in was how frequently he talked about the fundamentals and the importance of the physical part of practicing. And he just seemed much less like a whiteboard warrior. The problem with him early in the season was, man, there's a lot of stuff that he wants to improve, but it's going to take reps and it's going to take time. And it's also going to take eventually finding the right offensive lineman. It was going to take Ariante Ursary really taking his lumps early on as a rookie and coming along very steadily the entire season. With Ariante, I don't even know if there was a moment where I would say there was a really big leap forward. The part where I felt most emphatically like he'd made a lot of progress was in the second Jags game, because in the first Jags game, it's his first time playing left tackle in the NFL. His first game against the Rams, he started off playing on the right side, plays left tackle for the first time against Josh Hines freaking Allen. And he got taken to the woodshed. And then Juice Scruggs at left guard kind of got taken to the woodshed on some simple stuff like games. And they were foundering versus the blitz. That's changed a lot. Now with Titus Howard at left guard and with Ariante Ursary playing more like a pro. And then that second Jags game, he really understood and was dialed in. And Josh Hines Allen had a quiet game because Ariante Ursary had improved so much. That part's real. Like, I think they've definitely gotten better at that. Here's CJ on things that he thinks the Texans offense can improve.
Your first game back, what are some things you think you can do even better going forward in this game against the Chiefs?
I mean, all around, there's always things you want to clean up. So just communication, execution, all the little things, footwork, ball placement. I always can, tweak things and get better. So I'll, just get better as the weeks go on.
Yeah, the ball placement, the footwork, all of that. I thought it looked all really, really good last week. One of the questions people have had about CJ this week is, hey, what about CJ in the cold? Isn't he like 0-3 in the NFL in the cold? He is. I would submit this to you. He's 0-3 also in those same games against teams that were much better than the Texans. If you go back to the Baltimore Ravens playoff game, a cold weather game that CJ started, the Texans weren't going to win that game if it was 97 degrees out, if it was negative 27 degrees, if they were playing on the surface of the moon or in Mexico City. It wouldn't have mattered. The Ravens were just a better team. The Chiefs game in the regular season last year, CJ on the play that Tank Dell got injured, CJ made a great throw. I thought his accuracy was fine in that game. It was some late game errors after Tank Dell got injured that were really the problem in that game offensively. And I never at once thought like, oh, it looks like CJ's affected by the cold. You go to the game last year too. I thought CJ's accuracy was fine. It was the pass protection in the fourth quarter that really broke down with the offense. So I'm not worried about CJ in the cold. Played at Ohio State. I know that's not NFL cold because you're not playing in December and January, but still, I'm not worried about that. FanDuel has the over-under at 41.5. That's higher than we've been seeing earlier in the season. I think I would probably take the under on that. I haven't 100% dialed in on that until I find out exactly what's going on with Kamari Lassiter. But I do think this will likely be a low-scoring game, and also because the Texans have played kind of a low-scoring, low-possession style of football. D'Amico very much wants to grind clock. They methodically move down the field. They just got to figure out how to punch it in the red zone. But a lot of these games that they've played, they've had, the Texans offense is at 9 possessions, 10 possessions. That's a few lower than the average number of possessions in the NFL. And if they can do that and not turn the ball over, and the Texans defense takes care of business, it's not an exciting game, but it's one that I'm totally cool with. I'm fine with it. I'm not worried about it. A few of the notable stats in this game that are interesting, especially when we look at, all right, is this offense really starting to click? Stroud so far this season has a 78.4 passer rating in 5 games against top 10 scoring defenses, and most of those were all in all of them obviously were before. Well, actually, let's see. The Colts game would be the interesting one. But regardless, early on against some of the better defenses, the Rams, etc. Yeah, the offense in general had a lot of issues, and they had rookie Jaden Higgins is different than the Jaden Higgins we see right now. I'm not overly cowed by that statistic. I do think CJ's operating on a different level because he can trust his offensive line more, because the wide receivers are in the right spot at the right time. That was another big part of them being so successful versus the Colts and the blitz, is that CJ knew exactly where the receivers were going to be and got the ball out really fast. The other thing CJ's done a good job of this year is just simply getting the ball out faster. It's been an easier level of difficulty for the offensive line. They haven't had to block as long. CJ's not back there kind of just waiting on things, waiting to see if Nico Collins comes open and then all of a sudden taking a sack. They've gotten a lot better, and that's an entire operation thing. So his pass rating is 108.5 versus, 78.4 versus those top 10 scoring defenses. It's 108.5 in 4 games against all of the other opponents. Right now, the Chiefs are a top 10 scoring defense. They're 7th in the league at 19.3 points per game, which, by the way, I think is a 10th off of where they finished last year. So they're lower in the rankings than they finished last year, but they're allowing pretty much the same number of points per game as they did last year. The Texans, meanwhile, on defense, have allowed fewer than 20 points in 9 games in 2025. That's the most in the NFL, and it's tied for the second most such games in a season in franchise history. Back in 2011, Bulls on Parade, Texans did the same thing. The fewer than 20 points allowed in 5 of the 6 games, 5 of the last 6 games, well, including each of the last 3. I think the Texans right now are a team that's peaking at the right time. I think the offense has genuinely improved, and they're not going to be tested for the rest of the regular season by a defensive line like some of the ones they saw earlier in this season, the Rams specifically. I mean, talk about a nightmare of, wow, trying to figure things out on the offensive line while facing one of the most formidable defensive lines in the NFL. That was a tough nut to crack. Texans did not crack that nut. This has been the Believe in Texans podcast. Thank you for watching or listening. Please, if you're listening on Apple, leave a 5-star review and a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, etc. And thanks again to FanDuel for sponsoring.